All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who aren't familiar with my personal car, I have a BMW E92 M3, and I made a pretty long video on it going over like some of the mods I put on the car, and there's going to be a whole series for that car that's ongoing. There's going to be more M3 content on the way, but I'm in the process of moving, and I've got other exciting cars that I need to test out for the next month or so. So it's going to be a little bit before the M3 returns to the channel, but it will be back. But I love the M3. It's one of my favorite cars I've ever owned / driven. It's phenomenal. I love it. It's so exciting, right? It's one of my favorite cars I've ever driven. There's still plenty of things I want to do to that car and plenty of experiences I want to have with that car. I want to hold on to that car for a good amount of time. Theoretically, never sell it, but I'm the type of guy where it's like, as soon as I get relatively settled into something, I like to think about what's next and what's next to come as far as like next vehicle purchases and what I want to strive for next to have on the channel and have in the fleet, so to speak. And so earlier this year, I got to have my first real experience living with a Porsche Cayman, with a mid-engine Porsche, and it happened to be pretty much the best one ever made, the GT4 RS, which, I mean, that was a pretty eye-opening experience for me. And man, that platform, the mid-engine Porsche platform, is just on another level in terms of driver engagement and fun, especially when you pair it with an RS Motorsport engine sitting right behind you. That car is crazy, and if you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out. I'll have it right here in the corner if you want to watch that video after this one. And so there's a few other cars that I think are in the potential lineup for replacement / additions to have to the M3. But at the top of the list is for sure a 718 Cayman, or a Cayman of some sorts. And so a GT4 RS, that's gonna cost a good amount of money. That's like almost house money. Like, we're talking $250,000 for one of those things. I don't have that kind of money, but something that is a bit more attainable and offers a good chunk of that experience is right behind me. So this is the 718 Cayman GTS 4-liter, and let me explain what makes this different from a regular 718. So the standard 718 Cayman, the base model, comes with a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder flat 4. It's not really that exciting of a motor and not really something I'd be interested in, especially coming from something like my M3, which just has a wild motor sound. That would not be very fun. But this GTS 4-liter essentially comes with a 911 engine that's been bored and stroked to 4 liters, giving you more power than what you would get from a base 911 Carrera. And so today's video is essentially figuring out if the GTS 4-liter could replace my M3 in the future. So you're essentially working with a Cayman, a 911 engine that's bored and stroked, 4 liters, and you've now got 400 horsepower-ish, essentially, like 390 something. You can basically call it 400 horsepower, and about 309 pound-feet of torque. And you also have a 7,800 RPM redline, so it's not as quite of a screamer as my M3, but it certainly makes a good sound at the top end, especially if you have an exhaust on this thing, which unfortunately this one does not, because it's bone stock. It's a press car, but I've heard it online and it sounds quite good. I don't know why I did the thing. It was kind of weird. But on paper, this kind of has everything I want and kind of offers a similar philosophy to my M3. High-ish revving engine. You've got a mid-engine setup now, so the handling is going to be a lot better. It's not a heavy car by any means. We're looking at about 32-ish hundred pounds for a car like this. My M3 has 4 seats. This only has 2 seats, but you do have a frunk and a rear hatch for storage, so you're covered as far as like daily practicality. And I mean, it's a Porsche, so it's going to drive pretty well. It also looks fantastic. I will say though, I definitely prefer the previous generation Cayman front fascia for the GTS. It looked much more like a GT4-ish style car, whereas you kind of have the more flat lower grille area, whereas like I liked how the previous gen had these separated grills on each side. This just has a bit more soft feminine look to it. It's not a bad looking car by any means. I still think it looks great, but I definitely prefer the previous gen Cayman GTS front bumper style. But that's something I could change if I were to buy this car. In fact, I have seen GTSs with a GT4 front bumper and rear bumper setup, and the wing as well, and it looks quite nice. I'm not sure if I would go the full wing setup, but at least the front bumper, just to give it a bit more of an aggressive sporty look. So firstly, let's just go over the basics with this car. Front trunk storage. It's a very, very deep frunk. I could probably fit most of my body in here, honestly. Like, for basic grocery runs, things like that, my backpack, my gym bag, things like that, this is going to be perfectly usable for me. And then taking a look at the rear hatch, which I definitely love. You have some space behind the driver's seats if you want to, you know, put some stuff back there, although of course that's gonna inherently mess up some of your visibility. And then you have this area down here, which I mean can also fit more groceries, like a carry-on duffel bag, tripod. It's decent. And if you guys saw my video with the GT4 RS and road tripping with that car with my girlfriend, you saw how much stuff I was able to fit inside of that car, which is even more compromised than this car, the Cayman GTS. Yeah, the practicality of the Cayman is actually insane. And so I was already convinced that it would be a pretty good daily driver, at least a good daily driver sports car. Now, taking a look at the interior, I think we've got a really unique spec here that I haven't seen on a lot of Porsches, honestly. So we have this dark blue interior that goes all throughout. So pretty much everything you're seeing here is dark blue minus the actual trim. So even like the carpeting, the seats, the leather dash, it's all like this dark blue. I think it's carbonite blue is the name. I'm not sure. I'm gonna put the actual name like right here in the corner, but I honestly really like this. I'm usually like a silver and brown guy or silver and black if I don't have an option, but this dark blue actually looks really sick. And something I noticed on the configurator is that when you spec this dark blue, it forces you to get this carbon 1x1 twill steering wheel, which is still heated, which is actually pretty cool. You can still get a heated steering wheel even with this like huge carbon slab on the top and bottom, which I mean, the carbon kind of looks weird given that it's the only piece of carbon fiber in the entire car. There's no other carbon fiber trim everywhere. All the other trim is the silver material here. And so it does kind of seem like a little off, but if you were to spec the rest of the car in carbon, then I think it would make perfect sense and it would fit right in. And I think that would actually be a pretty cool spec, just replacing essentially all of the silver trim with carbon fiber. I'd be down for that. Of course, you have your signature cup holders that are also in the Lamborghini Revuelto now, borrowed from Porsche. And so it is definitely an outdated experience in here as far as the tech, but that's not why you buy this car. You buy it for the driver experience. And so that's why I think people are gonna flock towards the Cayman, because it's gonna be the only car, at least until they kill it off, that has the physical tachometer, as the 992.2 generation 911 just killed that off and removed it for a completely digital gauge cluster. But yeah, man, a lot of things in here are now considered old school, like an actual like grab handle for going into reverse neutral park and then popping it over into manual. This is like old school stuff for Porsche now. Then when you turn it on and pop it into accessory mode, look at how outdated this screen is. This is OG stuff right here. You have all the physical tuner media controls, the radio controls. You even have a physical disc drive right here to insert discs to play music or maybe movies. I'm not sure if this infotainment system does that. But yeah, overall, the tech experience in the 718, which is a 24 model year car, this one, is not that far off compared to my E92 M3, which is like 12 years old at this point. And so this is certainly not a car you buy for technology, but I think a lot of people are gonna flock to this car because it has all of these analog features that Porsche doesn't have anymore, like the physical gear lever. You have the physical clusters in the middle. Like everything here just feels like true driver focused stuff. But you should know that these seats are shockingly, and I mean shockingly, comfortable. I found that the super hardcore bucket seats that come standard in the GT4 RS, those are actually pretty solid and usable for daily driving and obviously look amazing, but these are definitely a step up in the comfort realm. They don't look as cool, not nearly as cool, but they are super, super comfortable and has made the daily driving experience for this car very nice for me. It's been a very chill drive. Whenever I want to chill, it's just a very chill, comfortable car, even though it's small and low to the ground. It's been a very chill, comfortable driving experience driving this thing every day. I honestly really like it. It's a super good daily driver. But unlike the GT4 RS, this is not a car I could buy and leave stock in the performance slash fun factor side of things. And I'm gonna turn the car on so you can get a feel of what I'm talking about. So that is the 4-liter engine that just came to life. Right now we have it in normal mode. I'm gonna switch it over into Sport Plus, and you probably just heard those valves switch open. Let's give it some revs, shall we? So it's pretty throaty. That's about 5,000 RPM, which it cuts off with the soft limiter, but let's put it in neutral and see if we can get some better revs that way. Well, no, we can't, unfortunately, but let's turn it off. It's not that loud stock, and unlike the GT4 RS, which I mean, I'm gonna keep comparing it to that car just because that is just like the epitome of Cayman in my eyes, and what the only other Cayman that I drove prior to this. And so unlike that car, you're not getting the crazy intake sounds, and so until about $5,000, it really doesn't open up. It sounds kind of airy and muffled, even with the valves open, and I'll see like the valve switch light on, so I know the valves are technically open, but it's not that great of an experience until you get to about $5,000, and that's when it really starts, like, you know, sounding good. Sounding like a really stroked, wow, is that pause? Sounds like a really beefy 911 motor. But now that we've got the sound stuff out of the way, I figured we should actually drive this thing, and so you can really get my full thoughts on the driving experience and why I think as a platform, as a power plant, this car makes sense, while still talking about some of my gripes and something that might be a deal breaker for me with this car. So let's get driving. Just like my M3, I wouldn't buy this car for 0 to 60 speed or just being able to go as fast as humanly possible. I can get an EV or, you know, a turbocharged car for that. But I figured we might as well figure out how quick this car is from 0 to 60. I've been driving it for well over an hour at this point, done a couple of slides, so it should be pretty warm as far as the tires. 69 degrees, Pilot Sport 4s. Let's see how we do. That's an aggressive launch. Holy cow. Wow. How did we do on that? All right, we got 4 seconds flat, which I mean, not terrible. I know this car can do like a 3.8, 3.7. Let's see if we can get below a 4 second. That'd be pretty cool. It was a 4.02, so I think it might hook up maybe just a little bit better this time. Let's find out. This time I'm gonna try turning traction control off. Let's see if that does anything. All right. That felt slightly quicker. Let's see what we did. And as I predicted, with traction control off, we get significantly better results. So a 3.87. That is a substantial increase just by putting the traction mode in sport traction mode. That's crazy. 3.87 for a car with just under 400 horsepower to the crank, rear wheel drive, naturally aspirated. That's pretty good. Those are pretty good numbers. I'm actually really happy with that, honestly. We're not on a drag strip, obviously. It's not the warmest day outside. 3.8 is, all right, let's do it one more time, just a third time. I think we might be able to get like a pretty good number this time. Man, what an exciting launch. It's obviously no Lucid Air Sapphire, but just that torque dump is just so eventful. I love launching this car. We got a 3.7 on the street. 3.7 on the street. Those are great numbers. 3.7 is actually really impressive for this car. I am thoroughly impressed. The launch just kept getting better and better. Man, this car is selling me. 3.7. Like I said, I didn't buy this car for speed, but 3.7, you know, not the warmest day, rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated, just under 400 crank horsepower, so probably in the realm of 350-ish to the wheels, and we got a 3.7 0 to 60. I am really happy with that. This is a car in which I don't feel like I need front axle lift. Honestly, like the ride height is almost perfect for daily use somewhere like where I live here in New Jersey, which is, you know, that's obviously a plus. Speaking of plus, let's throw this thing into Sport Plus and let's get ripping, shall we? Second gear. Man. The 4-liter version of this Carrera engine is honestly one of the most pleasant engine sounds I think currently on the market for a relatively attainable high-end sports car. Let's throw it back into first. But as you might have heard, I just put that into third gear, now fourth. One of the big problems with this car, even in the manual spec, is that the gearing is very, very, very long in this car. And so the top end of second gear is about 75 miles an hour, which I feel like is just a wee bit too tall for my liking. And it's not necessarily the speed that you top out in second gear, it's just the fact that I feel like the second gear just goes on for way too long. I feel like the GT4 RS is kind of accustomed my brain to be like these super fast revs and shifts, whereas like this engine really makes you take your time and kind of just work your way up to the top end of each gear. And so I feel like it would make this car slightly less enjoyable for twisties and canyon driving, which I mean, I don't do a ton of outside of testing for these videos, obviously. And obviously I live in Jersey, so there's not gonna be a bunch of that to do anyway. There's not a ton of scenarios where the long gearing is going to inherently impact my performance when doing canyon driving through kind of like twisty dynamic roads like I am now. There's not too many scenarios in which it's going to be a genuine problem for me, but it's just not something I prefer. So it's a tricky one for me, but the engine itself sounds good. So we're gonna stop down to second. It's a good sound, it's a good sound. It's a good sound. It's a great sounding motor. It doesn't necessarily sound better than my M3 with the V8 because I feel like you just can't compare those two engines. They're kind of offering a very similar philosophy, naturally aspirated, relatively high-end redline, but that car just tonally and its characteristics are kind of completely different. The downshifts in that car are just violent and snappy, especially with an aftermarket exhaust, whereas in this car it's kind of just like, yeah, it's quick. And that's another thing, right? So this car has the PDK, which is a dual clutch. My car also has the BMW GetRag dual clutch transmission. The PDK is obviously a much better transmission than this car. This is a newer PDK, right? And so it's just gonna be inherently a better transmission than something that was made well over a decade ago. In a handful of years, it'll be 2 decades ago that dual clutch came to be. And so the PDK is a lot more refined, certainly not as characterful and as exciting as the dual clutch in my M3, but it's definitely a good transmission and one that is definitely not going to impact my performance in any way. It's perfectly fast enough. But handling wise, this car is a boatload of fun and so freaking capable. Obviously, you have the mid-engine setup. You're working with about 3,200 pounds, so it handles corners like nobody's business. I absolutely love driving this car from a handling standpoint. We're rocking PS4 summer tires. I think 2 4.5s in the front and 2 6.5s in the rear. So actually a pretty similar setup to what I've got on my M3 from the factory. Obviously not anymore. My tires are a bit wider now. But man, on a cold start, you know, ripping on them a little bit, it's so easy to slide this car, even with traction control on. You can do these nice little slides when exiting a street. It's just a really fun, playful little car. And because you have that mid-engine setup, you have that weight in the middle as opposed to the weight being right on top of the rear axle in the 911. It's just a more playful, characterful car to drive, at least for me. Like I said, first thing I would definitely do if I were to get this car, buy an exhaust from Dundon or, you know, Gintani, something like that. But this car needs an exhaust. I don't want to say badly, but yeah, this car needs an exhaust badly. It just doesn't feel that alive until you get much closer to the red line. But let's do a little slide here. Yeah. Yeah, it's Just such a fun little playful little car to drive. Now, something else we can talk about is price, right? These cars on the low end with decently high mileage, we're talking about like 30, 40,000 miles, are going for about, 80, 85. And then if you want a super pristine, like super clean, nice spec, you're looking at 90 to 100. These cars are not cheap by any means. And so that goes right into the territory of another car that I'm considering as a future replacement or addition to the M3, which is a V10 first generation, but facelifted Audi R8. So that's been a car I've wanted since I was literally 8 years old, since it debuted with the Iron Man film. And so having that silver spec, the silver color, the carbon side blades, the coupe, but with the V10, that's a car that I feel like I just have to get at some point. I know it's not going to be the most fun or engaging driver's car, but firstly, it's a V10, and with a nice exhaust on there, it's going to be an absolute screamer. But also, it's just a timeless, beautiful car that I just want to experience and really please my inner child. It's something I feel like I need to do. And so yeah, man, I think the gearing and the exhaust, so those are two things that I would at least explore changing if I were to buy this car. But outside of that, the looks are great, and I think I would certainly get a GT4 style front bumper in this car if I bought it. Obviously, no GT4 badges. We're not doing that. You know me, we're not doing that. But basically just a GT4 front bumper to give it a more aggressive front end look. And I would pretty much change nothing else from like an aesthetic standpoint. I don't need, carbon fiber side skirts or anything like that, or a big wing or anything like that. The car has a beautiful silhouette as is, and so there's not much that I would feel like I need to change. This is my second time driving a Cayman, and so yeah, every time I do so, it's like I feel like this is it. The 911 is great, and the newer ones are so capable and so dailyable, and obviously they're iconic cars, but the Cayman I feel like is just much more me, Decisions. Man, this car drives really, really, really well. The engine with an exhaust is definitely what I'm looking for. Putting on a new front bumper would be expensive, but not a deal breaker at all, especially if I got like a, GT silver metallic, a very normal color to paint. Handles great, super dailyable. Will probably retain its value pretty well. Oh man, I don't know. I might be sold. Dang. They might have got me with this one. This is definitely a long-term thing. Don't expect a Cayman GTS to be on the channel in like 3 months or something like that. But I think I know what comes next now. All right, I'm gonna go think about this some more. Talk to you guys in the next one.